Yeah,
Okay.
natural resource. I meant.
Yes, we are just about ready to get underway. If everybody wanted to sit, in order. Give it 30 seconds. Okay, good morning, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. Welcome to the Rural Affairs Committee for March 19th. I want to do a quick sound check. Director Davidoff, how is the sound?
It's great, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Thanks,
Thank
Andy.
you.
Okay, so we've checked attendance. Christine says everybody is in attendance except Director Popoff has family issues to pursue this morning, so he is not with us. I'd like to double check. Do we have any councillors or other board members online? So no freedom of the floor. Thanks very much. So we acknowledge and respect the Indigenous peoples within whose traditional lands we're meeting today. Going to item 4 on the agenda, adoption of the agenda. I'm not aware of any changes, additions, or deletions. None from staff. So I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Weatherhead moved, seconded, Vandenberg, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We have received in this package the minutes of February 19th. Of course, they went to the board. Not aware of any changes to those. Delegations. We do have one delegation for an application. We have Larry Perapolkin in the room for item 7.1. None other than I'm aware of online. We do have some public in the room. Welcome. It's nice to have public here who will have questions at public time at the end of the meeting. So we will move to item 7.1. This is a subdivision application, agricultural land reserve, Perapolkin, on Sorokin Road in Area H. As I say, the director for Area H is not able to be with us today, this morning. And so, Sadie, can you give us the Coles notes? And maybe in particular, there was a revision to the map in the numbers of parcels. It didn't immediately show up on the public side of the web. If you could go over that and then give us the Coles notes, and then we'll move to the delegation.
So yeah, as Director Gaffney noted, this is an ALC application for a subdivision at 2505 Sorokin Road in Crestova in electoral area H. The applicant is proposing to subdivide a parcel that's currently 10.75 hectares into 2 lots, so 9.61 and 1.13 hectares. The original proposal that you guys would have seen that was put online was for a 3-lot subdivision. When this went out, the owner informed his agent that there had been a miscommunication and that it was actually a 2-lot subdivision, not a 3-lot subdivision. So if you guys saw the previous site plan and now, it essentially dissolved the lot line between the 2 smaller parcels on the northern side. So it wasn't a totally significant change, but it was a small change on that. Staff's rationale remained consistent. So a subdivision of ALR land can lead to increased speculation, higher farmland prices, and reduced agricultural activity. And as the application proposes to fragment ALR land without a clear public or agricultural benefit, staff are recommending that the board not support it. In this case, because the property is in an unzoned area with no CP, regardless of the recommendation that the board makes, it will proceed to the ALC for the consideration and final decision.
Okay, thanks, Sadie. Mr. Perapolkin, if I can invite you up to give any additional information that we would not have seen in the package. And then if you're willing to answer any questions from the committee. So
who should I be, David up or kind of good?
You did it for choice.
Since I'm Russian, I'll be David up.
David on. There we go. Fair enough.
Would you like me to stand or sitting?
Oh no, that's perfect because the microphone and everything picks you up best that way.
So just a little backstory about this, and it might clarify why this has been amended, the lots on there. In 2009, I was working with Josh Hanglo's father, Jerome, and after discussing, subdivision with him, he said, "Why don't you go ahead and apply? Because once you get the results, it's good forever. It's, if you get approval, it's good forever." So that's what I did, and initially it was a 3 parcel subdivision. But when I got the results from the ALC, we called it ALR at those times, it said you have a 2-year limit to complete the subdivision, which, I mean, it shocked me. I wasn't expecting to have to do work in 2 years. So the committee came out just before that, and they reviewed the lot and the whole property, and they didn't stay long. It's basically, most of it is bedrock, and there's outcroppings all over the place. So I tried to do the 2 lots. I put in 1 well, I bought a piece of equipment, and then, you know, the kids have 3 kids. They got older. One was graduating, you know, personal thing. I just didn't make it financially, and the time limit passed. I missed the window. So then about 2 years ago, my youngest son, he's, you know, like, I'd like to, you know, grow some garlic and move into the area. So I applied again, but before I applied, I tried to open that previous case that they gave me permission to do it. So I spoke to Ron Wallace, and he was very good. He said, you know, you can try and apply and reopen the case, see what happens. So they said, it's probably better, because it's going to be now just a 2 lot, if I just reapplied and made a whole new application. So that's sort of the backstory of that. I think that's kind of it. So I'm just appealing. My son wants to make a go of it there. There's about maybe 1.5 acres of flat usable land, and then it's the outcropping and the marsh. So he figures he can maybe do garlic or potatoes or something there.
Okay, thank you. So and we'll go to questions of the whole committee in a second, but just to clarify, because I know the Agricultural Land Commission used to have at least the local rep and one other, and sometimes staff, come out and did these field reviews. I don't know how often that happens now, but when they did the review previously, did they give you a recommendation at that time from the Agricultural Land Commission to support or not support, or did that just not get to that stage?
In 2009?
Yes.
Yeah, they showed up. There was maybe 3 or 4 members of their committee, and shortly after I got approval, I got go ahead.
Okay, because I think that was something staff was lacking. They didn't have a detailed, you know, agrologist study or report on soil conditions and that sort of thing that it's nice to have when they're looking at it, because as Sadie said, currently sort of the general policy is, in the absence of better information, try to maintain the agricultural land parcels a little bit larger so there's less speculation. So that clarifies that. Thanks very much. So
and I don't know if they did a soil analysis. I don't know if they had that stuff there at that time. I'm not sure.
There is historical analysis all through these areas. So
Okay.
I've seen it sometimes to go back to a 1960 something report, and they'll say, no, this is such and such type soil with this capacity for these types of crops. And
Okay.
generally they just kind of pull all the data together, and then they make a statement about this is the high, medium, or low value, you know, agricultural land. So that helps me very
So
much.
in the report, when it states that it rates the soils, and who
Yes.
did that? Was that done way previously?
Historical generally, yeah, from quite some time. So we have questions from the committee. Watson, please go ahead and start.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, the agrologist who did a lot of that soil mapping is now on my advisory planning commission.
Oh, okay.
Just short note. My question through the chair to you is, I think you've just answered it when I read the report in terms of this current application and what the ALC had indicated. I found it a little disturbing because they want us to do all the soil mapping and all of the assessment, whereas it's already known as 7 non-arable. It's pretty much bedrock. So that was, I think, now that I realized Chair Jackman, I think just asked you the question in terms of what did they tell you when they did physically come into the property? Because their response on this now is that we don't do that. We rely on you. And it just puts everybody in the middle of something where the land was never actually arable to begin with. So the fact that it's in the ALR from my perspective is actually misleading. But is there anything else you would add to what the ALC had indicated when you originally had them on your property?
They were very quick. They just came out and they had a quick look. And especially at that time, the trees were, you know, they were a little smaller. So you can see all the outcroppings now, the treatment, they're hiding a lot of that stuff, but they just said, go ahead.
Okay.
They kind of implied that, why is it even in the ALR? Why are we here? Kind of thing.
I will have questions when we're back to staff.
After we,
Yeah.
okay, thanks. So any other questions of the applicant from committee members? I didn't see anybody in the chat. I'll just check this again.
Nobody on chat.
Nobody in chat, no other questions. So thanks very much, Mr.
Okay.
Falcon. If
Thank
you
you.
wanted to step back for a while.
So should I be available or?
I wouldn't recommend you leave. Or, no, please, yeah, no, please just get.
Okay.
We're a little bit informal sometimes. That was a formal delegation, but sometimes it's very handy to look back for another question. So there's always the kind of three recommendations, support, not support, or no comment. So just general discussion. We don't have a motion on the floor yet. Director Vandenberg and then Sadie, we'll see if you wanted to add information. Go ahead.
Great, thank you, to the chair. The two questions to staff. The first one is in terms of the process, whether it's approved or not approved, which would be the recommendation of this board. In that regard, approved or not approved, how does this board communicate to the ALC? My first question.
Meaning support or not support. We don't approve anything with respect to these, but Sadie, support or non-support?
Yeah, through the chair, so the RDCQ board will make a recommendation of support or not support. That resolution that comes from the board meeting tomorrow will be included with all of the other staff report sent to the ALC for their consideration. So they'll see your recommendation as well as my staff report.
Supplemental, then they make the final decision regardless of our recommendation.
Correct. Yeah, there's a difference whether we stop something cold in some instances based on our land use planning, if you could explain, versus whether it's a flow through with comment.
Yeah, through the chair, I would say that maybe that term regardless is tricky because they're taking your recommendation. That's forming part of their consideration as to what decision they make. But this is a case because it's an unzoned area with no CP that you don't, as the RDCK board, have an opportunity to say no and stop it from proceeding to the ALC.
For the second question,
Yes.
if I may, and it's about the soils classification. And this is probably going to be, and I'll apologize up front, an unfair question to you. But what is it that you could suggest can be grown on class 7 land?
Green.
Through the chair, as an
Greenhouses.
agricultural expert. So I had the similar thought and I looked into how the ALC characterizes it, and you can go onto their website and see what they say is suitable for class 7 soils. And essentially it's not soil bound agriculture. So maybe if this was a flat parcel, you could do something like greenhouses. They kind of go towards the idea of we don't also know what agricultural innovations are going to exist in the future, what the conditions are going to be as those change. So we kind of work off that information, but what can be grown there, it is much more limited than say a class 1 or class 2 prime agricultural land for sure.
Thank you. And apologies.
I'm sure what's.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer that question. When I worked in food systems, I followed this quite a bit. Class 7 is considered non-arable with no potential for soil-bound agriculture. As the class numbers increase from class 1 to class 7, the range of crops decreases. So it's not arable, capable for arable culture or permanent pasture. Generally includes rockland, other non-soil areas and bodies of water too small to show up on maps, is the definition of class 7. So through the chair to staff, my question is, I actually, because of the soil classification, because I do understand it actually is more feasible to farm on lots such as this size, and I know that that's always been, like, we always think big lots. Price of land has changed that perspective. I would have no problem with supporting this. But my bigger question is actually the ALC's response to us in this one, which was, why do we bother giving you a response? Because you still go against it. And why don't you assess it yourself? I'm paraphrasing, of course, with a bit of flair. And that we should be evaluating the soils as though we have agrologists on staff. So with all of that, I find that really disturbing because we have asked for years that they reassess the arability of what is in the ALR so that we don't have to deal with these. This technically would never be in the ALR. So I don't know that staff can answer this, but perhaps my question is, how did you perceive the response from the ELC and our actual capacity to do what they think we do? The further context to that is that they think that everything is zoned in rural areas, which is another disconnection from understanding rural area. And again, that's because if it is zoned, we can say no and it doesn't go through, generally speaking. So that was a lot, sorry, Sadie, but do you have any feedback? Because essentially what I'd be doing is taking this to UBCM at another time, not a specific application, but our ongoing conversation around make the ALR land arable land as identified, and then we will have a lot less applications for this kind of thing.
Through the chair. Yes, so this, just to provide some context, this message that we're getting back from the Ministry of Agriculture and Food is not unique to our specific local government. It's something that they're trialing doing to everyone, like all local governments, because they're getting so many applications that they can't support based off their mandate. When I spoke with them about it, they said they're still sort of in a trial period and they're reworking as to whether they're going to go forward, just providing these sort of general comments. So it's definitely a discussion on their end. And I would say, while, we don't choose what the ALC boundaries are, something that I spoke with Nelson about yesterday was just, given the class 7, given that lack of arability of this land, this would be very likely a good candidate if, let's say this area was doing an OCP review to consider as part of, a block exclusion sort of policy. Oh, should the boundaries be redrawn here? Now, of course, the board, you're not doing that on a case by case basis, but it could be worth exploring from the RDCK side.
My only supplemental, which there's no motion on the floor, is that the last time we did go to the ELC to ask about the ability to reassess the land, they said, yeah, you can do that when you do your official community plan process, essentially giving us the job of identifying arable land, which is a whole other addition to the work we would do and not our jurisdiction. So I just have a lot of issues with the way they responded to that. Given Director Popoff is not here, I'm not sure what he would do, but I am in support of this application.
Okay, thanks. So before going to Director Vandenberg for the second time, and maybe I'll just, because it follows now, go to Director Newell and then to Vandenberg. On what you can do in a class 7, certainly you could have greenhouses and elevated production. We struggled, and to the applicant, we're going beyond the realm of your application, but because we don't have a motion on the floor, I'm letting conversation go a little ways. Once we have a recommendation, we will talk about that. With certain like greenhouse production, you're going to need some kind of processing facility. And we struggled with that. And then to have the economy of scale for processing, you're probably going to need off-site produce. And we struggled with that. And areas A, B, and C came up with what we thought was the fix. But as you know, area B is different from areas A and C with respect to off-site produce to come into a processing facility to make a niche market specialty operation viable. So the way to get from A to B to use class 7 land is very complicated and expensive. And maybe OCP review should be calling these properties light industrial with a agricultural, preferred use. I don't know, creating new zones. So yeah, this is an ongoing struggle in my mind. What to do with land that may or may not have a place in the current and future food production that we just haven't got there. And only time I've seen us local government take this on big time, Area A, RDEK, and it was extensive. They used students as much as they could. They reevaluated all the parcels there, not just for soil capacity, slope stability, slope ability to hold or retain water during the intense storm, stuff like that. And I have observed flattening of ground to control moisture in Area A for the vineyard, in Area B for the more extensive vineyard, and hundreds of acres. In fact, it is a 200-person worker camp proposal in Coldstream, where they have flattened hundreds and hundreds of acres. It's decent soil, but not because of the soil, because you can't control moisture, which is so scarce. And that is a bigger problem, again, whether or not the soil is stony, but of course the stony soil won't hold any water. So all of these things, we are using the wrong parameters entirely, trying to judge something based on class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's trivial compared to the scope of the problem. My rant, is that 2 minutes? Director Newell. I tend to support this kind of application, Director Newell, and then we'll move back to Vandenberg, or unless we have a recommendation. Oh, I should say, Director Popoff, my understanding is he would prefer we recommend support or no comment, because of his individual understanding. It was passed along through conversation that this is not a prime piece of property, but Director Newell.
Yeah, I'd be repeating that as well. My thinking is the difference between 10.75 hectares and 9.61 hectares of unarable land is hardly an issue to not support it, and is unique in that way. So even though, you know, similar requests may come forward, I think this is highly, I don't know what the right word is, defensible decision to support this. And as stated by various people, sometimes smaller lots can make it actually more possible for, as we're learning, for agriculture, and I'm not an expert by any means. So I would, you know, just my gut instinct was support it, but I would also refer, or, you know, because Director Popoff's not here. But I think I'll just leave my comments at that, I would, yeah, I would support this.
Okay, hearing a bit of the theme, go Director Vandenberg for the second time, and then maybe we need to put a recommendation for Director Vandenberg for the second time.
I'd like to make a motion to support this.
Do we have a second? I see a second, so
And-
continue.
So based on our conversation, which always is a good conversation, and respectfully with the director in his absence, and I do believe that the chair has had that conversation. So that motion would not be contravention to the concerns of Director Popoff. And just to know, just to be able to say that the applicant, like, so our recommendation would be perhaps to support, but we're not done yet. It's not our final call. But I think this is, does have those elements that are easily supported.
Okay, further discussion, what's,
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair to Sadie, does it, now I know we're going against your recommendation, but we're all good, team effort. When we submit a motion that is for support, but there's no zoning, is it helpful to include that we recognize the soil class and that is, and also that there was a previous application that was tentatively approved? Does that in any way inform the ALC why we might be making a different direction? I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah, through the chair, I think if you want to include your rationale, it's just more information for the ALC. I don't ultimately know how.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
okay, I'm not still seeing anyone else in chat. My only other thought that for myself that leads to support is the housing issue. That here is a lot on a road which already has several small lots, appears to be serviceable, and creates opportunity for housing in a far less expensive market than, say, 2 blocks from where we're sitting right now, Nelson. Further discussion.
So I did want to add the rationale to the motion.
Do an and further, or direction to staff to capture the comments and add it as they pass along.
Well, that's where I'm not sure, because if it's staff adding comments, it conflicts what staff is recommending, and I don't want to put them in that position. So this is the committee saying, based on our rationale, capturing comments, which is that the soil capability, previous approvals or subject to approvals. So I think that's why I was checking in with Sadie around does it help ALC to understand why we made a different call?
That could either be an and further to the recommendation, or it could simply be we vote on the recommendation and direction to staff. Please capture and include comments from the committee as you forward the application through the ALC. Sadie, is there a difference or preference? Or Sangita or Nelson's online, I think too. He's online there.
I'm not sure.
Are you able to hear me, Chair?
Yes, so go ahead, Nelson.
Yeah, I would say either one's fine. Either way, the information that you're wanting to add, we can provide that additional commentary in our report that goes to the ALC, and in order for them to give that some consideration as well. So it doesn't need to be in the resolution necessarily.
So that would be the cleanest if
Yeah.
right now it's simply option we support all the wordings there for tomorrow and then direction to staff is pretty clear.
That's fine with me, as
Suitable.
long as it doesn't put staff in an awkward position.
Thanks.
Just making clear that that was the board direction, or sorry, committee direction.
Committee thoughts
Okay,
or
thank you.
recommendations. Further, seeing none, all in,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, you're close.
Just a comment,
Director Van, go ahead.
it is my motion and,
Sure.
I would like to suggest the and further is for the reasons that Amy has pointed out, seems to be the most logical and prudent.
Do you
way
have
of
wording
forward.
for the end further?
Well, no, I don't, but, you know,
Well,
if you wanna give me a moment.
Okay, I'll do it.
Okay, so just, that's what we're searching for.
And further, the committee supports this due to soil capability at a class 7, comma, need for housing, comma, and previous ALC review, which indicated support. Is that fair?
Okay, Christine, did you capture that?
And I see that as a friendly
So
amendment.
friendly amendment for the mover and seconder was kind of split, might have been Weatherhead, actually I was looking at the time. So friendly amendment with the end further, or parliamentarian hasn't told me otherwise. You're good. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor of the motion with friendly amendment? Any opposed? I see all in favor hands. So that will be the recommendation, goes to the board tomorrow. And care, it might be somewhere around noon or 1 o'clock, we'll review that, but absolutely you won't be required or requested to make any further comment on it as applicant. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you, I appreciate the comments and the support for. Thank you very much. Yeah, good luck with it.
So we will move to item 7.2, which is for information. However, I have a full page of questions, so I don't know if this is going to be received for information. I feel I do want to entertain conversation, but it's up to the committee how far we go with this because it's for information. So we have Rishab has modeled this, I guess, after what we've seen in Area G recently. So if you wanted to give the overview, to me, there's quite a bit here. And then I don't know if we want to take questions as we go or just, what would you give, like a first 5-minute overview or?
Yeah.
But if you want to pause and take questions, then we'll see how people are absorbing the information. Thanks, please go ahead.
Through the chair, greetings. The purpose is to provide information regarding amendment bylaw number 3012, which if adopted will amend the regional district of Central Kootenay planning procedures and fees bylaw number 2457/2015. This amendment will formalize development approval information procedure as described in division number 6 of part 14 of the Local Government Act. The amendment established a standardized framework applicable to existing official community plans with designated development approval information areas, as well as to future OCP updates and newly adopted OCPs, ensuring consistency across the RDC tier. So I emphasize here, its application is subject to the jurisdictional scope defined by the respective OCP. So quickly highlighting the proposed bylaw changes. The first is the delegation of authority, which is point number 11B. Delegating the authority to require development approval information to the general manager of the Development and Community Sustainability Services with provision for reconsideration by the board. Secondly, fee schedule update, which is schedule 8.4, allowing applicants subject to a decision by the general manager of Development and Community Sustainability Services regarding development approval information required in the DAIAs to seek reconsideration of that decision at no additional cost. The third, which is the introduction of the Schedule S. So the schedule is established specific procedures and requirements for development approval information areas as designated by the official community plans. So since this is as an information, so the next step will be to review and incorporate suggestions based on the feedback received. So I'm open to questions now.
Definitely, that was fairly short and direct, thank you. So just going to check. Don't see anybody in chat. Questions from the committee here before I get to myself. I see Vandenberg and Watson. Please go ahead, Director Vandenberg.
Thank you through the chair. So this is your request, you're soliciting our input to here. And I thank you for that. My question is, when I go to the red lines, we're adding a schedule S, which procedures and requirements for development, approval, information areas. So in the beginning, I'm going, what is that? So thank goodness for those things called complexity and that sort of thing. And I found out from the legislation what that entails and the tools in the toolbox that it provides. So my question is, why are we doing this now? I'm not objecting to the tools, but in the sense when it comes to the tools is, are we not putting a bunch more layers on to make it even harder for development to go through? So I'm kind of on the fence trying to determine, is this truly a necessary set of tools? Why haven't we already done this? And does this make it more difficult for our constituents to move ahead with their development? I guess that's my questions.
Sean? Yeah, definitely.
Through the chair, so in area G, development approval information area is identified under water course development permit area. Now the inclusion of DAIs in electoral area G land use bylaw number 2452 was not accompanied by corresponding updates to the planning procedures and fees bylaw. So this amendment addresses the gap by ensuring clear procedures are in place for requiring development approval information. So now the problem was like when it was introduced, there was not corresponding changes in the planning procedures. So now it has been entered into the electoral area G. We have to establish procedures for it. And also if I talk about the application in area G, it is only applicable in the areas which are identified under the water course development permit area. So I hope it clears the question.
Further, Director?
Supplemental.
Yes.
I had so I thought this was for all areas. But you are very succinctly explaining this is for area G. But my question was, how does this help you do your job and prevent layering a bunch of items over development? And my initial question was, why are we doing this now? Why hasn't this done before? This is such a great thing.
Yeah. So through the chair, like I said that the development approval information, the scope depends upon the OCP. If an OCP is identifying it, we have to maintain a procedure for it. So I'm not sure like why it has not been done in 2018, but since it was a hanging thing, so we have to establish the procedures for it. And secondly, it is just not only for the area G, but in future, if further OCPs say that we want to have development approval information, so these procedures can be applied to them.
Thank you for the explanation. That does make that more clear. It is whatever the OCP suggesting that ought to be in there, should be in there, this needs to be in there. You understand? Why it was not done before 2018 to now, we don't know, but here we are today. Does not answer my question as to what is the value of these tools and the potential layering, because I don't understand the value of this. And I can't approve something that I don't understand the reasonable value of adding this in.
So through the chair,
Yes.
so having such an approach in place provide guidance. Say for instance, like if the, now currently we have this procedure in place, but it is not formalized. So the planners can ask for information, relevant information from the applicant, but there is no procedure to that. So with these regulations in place, with these procedures in place, the delegated authority will went to the general manager. And general manager on their discretion can decide that a particular development approval information is required or not. So it is providing two benefits. First, it will give clarity to the application. Also, it will be beneficial for the applicant because an applicant will be able to put forward the points. With the additional information and studies and impact assessment, applicant can prove their case to the committee and the board. So it is a chance to them as well as to the staff. And even it can help committee and the board to make an informed decision.
So I'm gonna move through the speakers list. That was quite a few supplementals and there's a number of questions, including myself. So just what we've captured so far here, I have Watson, Graham, Davidoff, Cunningham, myself. So let's just continue on with the speakers list and questions. Chair Watson, go ahead.
Thank you. My question is regarding the delegation of authority to general manager, the one in the service. And mostly that the terms here, it says DAIA requirements, and I'm going to highlight this, will not apply to every application or in every circumstance. They will only be triggered at the discretion of the GM of development. My concern with that is that whenever we're doing any kind of assessments or receiving assessments, if we are not qualified professionals, we are strongly advised against determining specific requirements. For me, that conflicts with that overall guidance around how we can request or even integrate assessments. And so I'm not sure how we're addressing that when we don't, we really discourage looking at forestry referrals. We really discourage looking at other referrals when we're not qualified professionals to assess those. So what are the metrics that would determine what would be applied and what would be required so that it is using a set standard and not just general subjectivity?
And Rashad, I should note that you may not be able to answer all these questions because some of them move into the realm of policy and governance, and that'll be a board conversation at some point, but so much as you can, please go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So through the chair, first of all, the requirement of the studies, that will be defined by the OCP. Say for instance, OCP G clarifies that, if I may quote from the area G OCP, it says like, development shall in accordance with the recommendations of an assessment report prepared by the qualified environmental practitioner in accordance with the provincial riparian area regulation assessment methods. So it is emphasizing that the required information is regarding the riparian area regulation assessment. So OCPs direct us like what sort of studies are required and who should prepare it. And so I hope that this provides an angle to the question, like how we are deciding it, what is required. And secondly, since it has been prepared by the qualified professionals, so we are relying on the recommendations which they are providing because they are also governed by the Professional Governance Act. So,
with apologies, I have to ask something and intervene here a little bit. You said that the needs for the studies will be defined by the OCP. But beyond that, there's still discretion. So either something is needed if it's in the OCP and it's on the list, it will be done. But now I've heard the word discretion. So there's a huge conflict there, which could lead to bias and inequitability as opposed to standardization. I'm struggling with that. And the other thing is on this list, a riparian area protection regulation is not a requirement. We have sat with the Minister of Staff and they said, if we do that, it's 30 meters everywhere, and we are not prepared to do that. So as an example, you use an example that is not our policy or our board direction at this time to consider that, because you've been told it's all or nothing. So just using that as an example is problematic for me, and having it on the list is problematic for me. I'm just saying you won't be able to answer all of this because there is so much backstory to this situation that, but however, maybe inappropriate. I will go to Director Watson. I hear someone online,
Nelson.
Nelson, please go ahead and then
That was
back
just
to
me,
Chair Watson. Go ahead. Nelson?
Sorry, are you speaking to me, Chair Jackman?
Yeah, I'm just interjecting here with, there's so many things, I'm seeing answers to questions with examples that aren't currently relevant. No
Yeah, and I
fault
wanted to
to Rashad because he hasn't got the history. So some of these I would invite yourself or General Manager Sedan to jump in because this is speculative responses to very real concerns is how I'm seeing this. So either Nelson or Sangeeta, I see Sangeeta's hands up.
I will let
Please.
Nelson speak first through the chair, and then if he hasn't covered what I'm going to speak about.
And I did have a question.
Absolutely, and then back to Chair Watson. Go ahead, Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. So just a couple things to clarify. I think the important message here is what we're proposing to bring forward in these changes is formalizing something we're already doing. So as an example, when we receive a development permit application for, say, a riparian area, the usual course of action would be for us to require a riparian assessment. So that's an example of a study that's needed to support that development application. That's a pretty routine one. Another would be, say, in the case of requiring a geotech assessment for if there's in a hazard area is another example. And so these are things we're routinely doing. Having this in the procedures bylaw just formalizes something we're already doing. There was a question asked as to why now, and I guess because we observed that it was something that was advised when the Area G OCP was done. So it was advised when the legal review was done. And but it was missed and didn't get into the procedures bylaw. We're now updating Area I OCP. And in doing so, we are also identifying this or designating these development application information areas in that OCP as well. And so as we proceed to update OCPs, we will probably address this as in due course. And the corollary to it, of course, is ensuring that it's in the procedures bylaw as well. Last thing I'll say to this is, in addition to this, we're also updating and adding terms of references for all the various types of reports that we routinely need, as like riparian assessments and geotech assessments, in order to ensure that consistency and transparency of what's required in all cases, and in order that it isn't just an ad hoc decision, but it's grounded in a consistent pattern to address the needs of that particular application type. And I hope that helps, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Sangeeta.
Through the chair, I'm fine.
Okay, I'll go back to Board Chair Watson, who I interrupted. Please continue with your
I'll get you
follow-up.
tomorrow.
Oh,
kidding.
you are the chair tomorrow. Okay, sure.
My follow-up question is just, I hear what is being said. I guess I'll just premise that I've always had an issue with the delegated authority because there is disconnection between what we might as elected officials hear on the ground versus what's being done within the office. And it's not a credibility thing. It's an actual, can't follow where this is going. And so the delegated authority just disconnects us from having engagement within those. And there's a bigger conversation that's so kind of what Chair Jackman was saying, there's a bigger conversation here that is not necessarily within your history. So apologies for that. My next question was just, what do we do with all of these reports? Again, I go back to the qualified professional, and if we require reports on something, generally, I do know with the riparian area or the watercourse development permit, it does give you, if the qualified professional says this is what you can do, then we will make sure you do that. But there's a certain limit, again, to that ability to integrate what a qualified professional has recommended and how that lands on the ground. My bigger concern is that there can be kind of like a consistent need for reports that don't actually change, or do we have the qualifications to infer that change on the ground? And I'm not interested in more reports that are not actually achievable. And so that's a concern I have again with the delegated authority and not fully grasping how are they using that discretion. And so I don't say that as a credibility point. I say that as we're disconnected from it.
Sandy, I see your hand. Go ahead. Yeah, it's easier for that mic to pick you up if you're closer.
So as the delegated authority, I thought I'd better explain the methodology. So it has to be, as was pointed out by Rashab and by Nelson, it has to be in the OCP, and the procedures for how we implement those development requirements needs to be added to our procedures bylaw in order to be transparent with the public. The discretion that is being discussed here is really more at the time where I have implemented discretion. Most often is when we have a non-compliance issue, where the property owner has gone and done things without acquiring development permits, and in order to address the impact of whatever that development or that manipulation of the land, that's when we use our discretion to get remediation done as per what the biologist recommends and what's observed on the ground. In most cases, I actually go and observe. I actually talk to the property owner. I try to understand their issues, and I can think of one, for example, where they actually put a whole bunch of rocks on the foreshore and created a groin that with giant rocks, and there was a water line that was just adjacent to it, non-compliant at the time. And then when we went to go and see compliance, I had to assess, okay, what is reasonable for that property owner to do to remediate that site? So that's where the discretion lies. I just want to clarify that.
I don't comment.
And if I may say one more thing,
Yeah.
the professional reliance model is what is applicable here. So the terms of reference that Nelson is mentioning is what applies. So for when we ask for an engineering study or a geotech study, we rely on the EGBC professional reliance model and the checklist that they have to ensure that they're compliant in whatever they recommend. Similarly, RP Bios have a similar method, process in place. So the terms of reference would reflect some of that to ensure that we are aligned in what we ask for, and that it makes sense when we receive those reports. And I read them often, and I have been reading them for, I think, I'm a geologist by training, so I've been reading things like that for years. So I can't say I actually understand those things.
Final comment.
Yes, go ahead.
I just want to depersonalize it because you are the role. I don't want to make this about what you are doing,
Yeah.
because what we're saying is the
I'm just
discretion
going
goes to the
by
GM of that service. And I will remain with the concern that if we are going to use discretion to let landowners know how to mitigate, that is a qualified professional that
Absolutely.
I would be flagging as where's that discretion, and I have concerns with that. So that's just my note. It's not about you at all. It's about whoever's in that role and what qualifications do they have.
I was just explaining my methodology.
Thank you.
So, quite a few speakers.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's good. It's for information, but we don't know what's gonna happen when it goes away, so we might as well talk about it now. So we have Graham, Davidoff, Cunningham, myself. Go ahead, Director Graham.
Thank you. So I think through the chair that Director Watson has really brought a lot of what my concerns are again with this delegated authority. And I've dealt with already complaints from residents on this specific issue. For me, in fairness to all, I think it should be clearly identified. These are really expensive reports that we're asking for here. And I think it should be clearly outlined. If you want to do this, these are the reports you need. And if you want to do that, then these are the reports you need, and not left to discretion of any individual, because that's not a fair way of doing things. And also, even in terms of the compliance for the things that have been done without the permits, I think that process is very discretionary. And I think that needs to be changed as well. But I have concerns with this. And at this point in time, I would not support it. Thank you. I don't need a response.
Okay, thank you, Director. Director Davidoff.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I've also had concerns raised about DAIAs because our OCP is up for third reading tomorrow and adoption. And the key thing is it includes DAIAs just like Area G's OCP contains them. I just did a little bit of work on this, and my understanding, and again, staff could correct me if I'm incorrect. Right now, with development permits, staff has the discretion to do anything that they need to do on any development permit without a listing of the types of things that may happen. And it's my understanding that with the use of DAIAs, everybody will know exactly the types of reports that could be requested. And there is transparency. And there's also potential for reconsideration by, for example, it could come back to us. So am I reading this correctly, that this is not a big change from the delegated authority that we have provided to staff, to the general manager, but this provides a transparency as to what types of things on the menu of reports, for example, that could be requested, and basically if there's any issues, staff can bring it back to us. Am I reading this correctly? And I'm just wondering who can best answer that.
Through to Rashad.
Yeah.
Or go ahead. Nelson, were you wanting to?
Oh, I was just
address
going to
this?
say, yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to say, you have it correct, Director Davidoff.
Thank you. That's all I need to know.
Okay, thank you. Director Cunningham.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. My question to staff. This is Area G, of course, and my bylaws have been in place since 2018, I believe, so about 8 years. How many of these requests have we had in 8 years? Any idea? A rough idea? To the chair, to staff.
Chair Jack, I don't have
Yep.
it off the top of my head, but it would be a handful of riparian development permits I can think of in Area G. It isn't a lot.
Okay, thank you. I was just wondering how often this change in bylaws are going to be used. I have no comment about it at the same time because, of course, it doesn't only apply to Area G; it applies to everybody else. And other areas have way more riparian area problems than I think Area G has. So I would certainly listen with interest and see how everybody else feels about this. The general idea is good. We may need to clean it up, Chair, but perhaps we could refer this to the next meeting and do a little bit of work on cleaning it up. That's a suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. So I'm not seeing anyone else added to chat. I'm next on my list. So I'll pick up where Director Cunningham just left off. In terms of a list, aside from the fact that people start looking at this, they might say, well, there is generally more barriers than there appear to have ever been to develop in rural land, so it's not going to be economical. I have a concern about this has an impact on any momentum to increase housing stock or do anything in rural lands, particularly when there's studies indicated like traffic impact, pedestrian safety studies, tree assessments. And people do tree assessments on their own volition because they don't want a tree to fall on their house or in their building or damage themselves. For us to start saying at discretion of an individual or position within the regional district, now we need a tree assessment, kind of to me strips away some of the common sense. When somebody's assessing a property and saying, I have the means to create something that's needed or wanted by society, and here's how I plan to go about it, they will do the things that they know they need to do to a certain degree. To me, when they look at a list like this, it may be almost a threat that at the discretion of an individual position within an organization, they may be required to do 6 or 7 or 8 more things than they thought were reasonable to be applied to their proposed development. What they want to do on that site to meet what society needs or wants. And that's why people develop, why they add a house, why they build a small apartment, while they create a trailer park or an RV site. That's why people develop. They don't develop stuff because I'm gonna be a billionaire. Yeah, that's a motive. But you gotta realize that if there's no market or need or demand for that, that they just won't be successful. The more indications we give them that there are financial barriers to moving ahead with something, I would see this as having people walk away from rural land and rural development. If that is the intention of the regional district, let's be very direct and say, we do not support rural development, period. Devalue our lands by 10 or 20% right off the top. I mean, this could be interpreted by people who actually engage in development opportunity as a don't come to us, don't try. Many of these things exist, yes, but this is a statement that you may be required to do many more of these things as life evolves. So to me, it could be a bit of a shock to landowners. I do have a bit of a problem, and I think so. Director Cunningham just said, clean it up a bit. And maybe that's better words than what I had here, because one of these reports talks about demand for local services study. Okay, we've been talking about need studies and development potential, and I see potential for clusters of 60, 80, 100 houses increasing to 200 houses because they know how to provide the water and sewer, and they're expert on this. I'm going to finish my comments. But then I see further down something about site access and servicing. So there's servicing there that overlaps with the other servicing. And then there's another report about waste management plan. So there are elements of duplication in this list that maybe one plan is more applicable to a more commercial, say it was a small apartment block development as opposed to a 2-house residential development, that kind of thing. But I don't see this list as being as clear, providing the clarity perhaps for the unwashed like me, the uneducated person. I see it more of a list of things of, wow, am I going to have to do one of these, 10 of these, and do 3 of these overlap? Is one a future planning visioning exercise that government should have done? Demand for local services study? That's government's job. Or is this something very practical? My real servicing on this site with this access. And that's where I don't see the level of clarity that's kind of being
Can you have
promoted.
you have White and David off.
Okay, so I have a few other concerns. In terms of delegation of authority, if the concern is non-compliant, non-cooperative landowners, maybe we need to clarify the language of delegation of authority where the board would be made aware prior to us going down a certain path. And any citizen who's sitting here as public could realize that every organization has to realize from time to time you go to court. And what is the nth degree? And of course, we would be having conversations from time to time about many different things. When does push come to shove? When is it just a mechanical procedure? We're going to do this, 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 and you're going to be told to do this and this by someone in one position? And when does the board support a much more aggressive path to compliance? That conversation probably is never ending, but I would like to resume maybe some of that conversation before going down a path where there are so many reports and so many things to do at not $500, maybe $5,000 each, that it's not clearly understood how far does this board want to push any individual situation of non-compliance, because I heard that raised, and that is a big question. I've seen in cities, I've lived in the middle of nowhere, where they tear houses down that are non-compliant. So I think there's a much bigger conversation here before we say this is just providing clarity. To me, it's providing partial clarity. It's also opening maybe a can of worms if we don't have the policy and the board commitment to say, what is the end game? And when does the board step in and make decisions? And when is it a delegated authority? Because this list to me is a little bit scary. I'm not going to go over all the other points I have here. I did see Sangeeta's hand, and now we have more people wishing to speak. Let me just check the list again. Sorry,
White and David off again. Nelson.
Okay. Okay, so see Sangeeta's hand, then we'll go to Nelson, then back to Director David off, please.
Through the chair, I'll let Nelson speak first.
Okay, go ahead. Nelson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say again, we brought this forward just for information purposes prior to actually bringing forward the bylaw amendments for consideration. So if you don't want this, we just won't go forward with those amendments and bring them to you at the next meeting. We'll just end it here. But I did also say that we're doing this in response to legal advice we received when the Area G OCP was completed. And so that's why this is coming forward. It's formalizing something we're already doing. It's not new regulation. Just wanted to reiterate that.
Except I read in between sections 486 and 485, when or if we do this, it does lead to sort of a higher expectation of the province that we will require certain things. So if there's a problem with Area G, absolutely. What is the fix to Area G? Maybe without applying to everybody. That's my first question. And then the rest of it maybe goes back to Director Vandenberg. Why are we doing this now when we have so many other things on the work plan? Don't expect an answer. Sangeeta, and then we have to go back to Director Davidoff. And I don't know if we plan to make a recommendation. For me, this is just trying to understand a little bit where this might lead. Sangeeta, then Director Davidoff.
Yeah, through the chair, I mean, this is really aligning what is already in your OCP with procedures. Just wanted to clarify. So the guidelines within a development permit are what we follow to ensure that the DP is being met, the requirements under the DP is being met. This procedure is what is not visible to the public. So adding that into our procedures bylaw is what is being recommended by staff. Beyond that, I have no more to say.
I understand that. What I don't understand is how far the discretion will be taken to potentially create a bias in evaluating various landowner applications. And the only thing I've heard to speak to that was in issues of non-compliance or unwillingness to comply. That's where I want to see more work done. Showing people what you might have to do is fine. I do have Director Vandenberg. I'm sorry, Davidoff, Vandenberg. And then you don't have a recommendation. I guess we'll let staff take it away. Davidoff?
Thank you, Chair. So now I'm getting confused. My understanding is right now we have delegated authority to staff on development permit applications, full stop. Staff has the total discretion to determine what reports are necessary, from whom. This codifies the types of reports that may be requested. Staff has full authority to request any of these reports right now without it being codified, without the public even knowing that those reports could be requested when they want to develop something. So that's what I'm hearing. So what we have now actually gives staff way more discretion than having this codified would give. And right now, staff determines whether something gets reconsidered or not, or brought to the board, and that will continue. So my understanding is that this is clear to the public. It takes away, it provides more transparency for people that want to develop in rural areas. And that's what legal said. I think that's my understanding is that's what legal said. Like, you have to make sure this is codified if you're already using it. And we're doing it in Area G. My understanding also is that all OCPs moving forward are going to be looking at this codification. So our OCP comes on tomorrow. If we include, which we already have in our OCP, the DAIA language that exists in Area G, my question, I guess, is to Stuart, is that if and when we go through the process of this policy and bylaw, then whatever we pass will apply to Area G and I. Am I correct? Through the chair.
Through the chair, yes, assuming adoption of the Area I OCP.
That's it. So basically, Chair, supplemental, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
So this conversation is important, but I'm looking for clarity because I'm right on this thing. And what the discussion that's happening right now is actually moving away from more transparency and leaving discretion with staff who have complete discretion to request anything they want at this point. So I hope that my understanding is correct through planning staff. Is that correct? Whoever can answer that.
Sangita or Rochelle? Go ahead, Rochelle.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That helps me a lot for tomorrow. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I find this statement, anything they want, scary, because we have not asked for the province to impose riparian area protection regulation. So to use it as a comparative or a metric to me seems unbalanced, that we would be asking people to go through a process which is in fact not the process which we said we invite as a board. To me, that's sort of like a policy decision. I will go to Director Vandenberg for the second time, and then maybe we'll move to the next item.
Great, thank you. I still understand this as just being an opportunity to explore conversation. I don't know that there's any direction that needs to be given other than what we're talking about. I fully support clarity and transparency. Always will, always have. I do key in a little bit to what Nelson was suggesting. And I've heard, the conversation around metrics and discretion definition. So Nelson triggered something of interest for me, and that's the terms of reference. I don't know if that's built in to this bylaw, how that terms of reference actually comes to light, but it makes sense if you've got right now we're looking at 24 or more requirements that a developer, which I just developed, I would be looking at this and saying, okay, being prepared, need to get my ducks in a row. I need to understand which of these is going to affect me. Right now, I have no idea. It's just the discretion of someone else. Further to that, as an example, I took H, flood hazard assessment, and I went to the RDCK website and I wanted to plug that in so I could do my diligence and research on it. One problem, there is no search opportunity on our RDCK website anymore, on the new website. Secondly, if there was, would I be able to get the elements that I need to know to see if that flood hazard assessment would apply to my development? That is what I'm trying to do, is I'll go through all 24 of these and figure out, does that apply to me or not? Because I like doing my work in advance. I'm probably like any other developer. We want to know where my time and costs are going to be before I get this thing rolling. And so I'll go back to terms of reference comment that Nelson had. That would help me tremendously to determine what metrics that planning is using for me to comply with or be prepared to. They don't exist right now. And then secondly, if I go and do all that research for 24 or more items, what information am I going to get back before I start my project or just decide that I'm going to invest 1 red cent into going forward? So that is worthwhile in this conversation. I'm all about clarity and understanding what is necessary. But I don't know. This is too abstract right now. There's got to be some more metrics and stuff applied to it.
I don't know if there's, go ahead.
Yeah.
You can, yeah.
Through the chair, I just want to highlight one point in Schedule S that says, like, prior to the application, it is recommended that the applicant confer with the regional district on the proposed application with the for guidance or alternative procedures, so they can discuss with the staff.
Can I? Go ahead, and then CEO.
To your point, brilliant. But in my actual real day life, that did not occur. I didn't have that opportunity. I had a couple of oops, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what I wanted to eliminate. If I would have known it in advance with a proper checklist or something of this nature with terms of reference, how it's going to apply to me, I could have saved myself time and money. But as a real life person who went through it, that did not occur, what you just said. Brilliant, but it didn't occur.
CEO, Stuart, you had some thoughts?
Yeah, so through the chair, I just, maybe it's just to go on the word discretion that I think is causing a little bit of apprehension. And there's no action requested today, so there could be feedback. This could be referred to the next meeting for further discussion. But what I think might be helpful is that if staff brought back some examples of how the GM might work through an application and what regulations and references they'd be referring to say, okay, in this case, we do need to ask for this report and show you as a committee, this is why we're asking for this report, because it's required in ABC or just in A, as opposed to the fear, which I think I'm hearing, which is the fear is that you're delegating the authority for the GM to just ask for anything just because they feel like it, right? They had a bad sleep and they want to ask for this report, right? But that's what we want to get away from. So maybe bringing back some practical examples on how the applications are worked through, what reports we might ask for and why might help you digest this a little bit better, and then maybe lead to some different wording that we put in there to eliminate that at full discretion, those types of type of language.
Thank you for that. No one else on the speakers list. More than an overview. Thanks very much, Rashad. Got our feet wet on this one, and I don't think there's any direction to staff right now. I think the continuing direction of staff is you have a massive work plan. So if we see something come back, I wouldn't want to necessarily try and set a timeline for that. Just here's some thoughts, some concerns. Thanks very much.
Are we referring this?
No, this is for information. The implication is staff could create a set of terms of reference and draft a bylaw that would maybe come for actual reading that hopefully has some thoughts around our concerns here. Like, to me, if waste or servicing is mentioned in 3 reports, maybe one, they should all be together and it should be waste level 1, 2, and 3 because of this, that, or that level of development, so that someone will have clarity. They just don't see servicing showing up in different places. They will see, depending on what they're doing, there is a hierarchy of potential reports that they may be required to prepare based on the nature of the development. To me, that would provide clarity. Right now, I see a daunting list with words repeated. So, sorry, Director Newell, but to me, if you want to give direction to staff as to how to come back from what we've talked about.
I know you were wrapping it up, which is quite appropriate, but it felt like it got wrapped up with nothing. And this is deemed important by staff vis-a-vis transparency. I think that, you know, someone looking at a daunting list could say, oh my goodness, what applies to me? And we hear that staff are there to help. But I think we need to continue. I'd like to make a motion.
Absolutely, but CAO Horn did
He did,
try and give some of a wrap.
he had provided context to come back to us with what we've heard today.
I had heard him say perhaps we.
Yeah, absolutely, though, you have the floor,
So I didn't
Director,
hear what was
if you want to move
Well,
referral or return to this or send.
Was that direction to staff then?
I don't know, Chief of Staff.
I don't want
To the chair, I think we've got direction on the content you're looking for. I don't think we have direction on timing. However,
Yeah,
Chair
fair
Jackman
enough.
suggested, let's not bump this to April and pinch it into a work plan that staff's struggling to maintain right now.
Well, I heard Director Davidoff, you know, say he needs this in his, for his OP's official community plan, OCP. You know, so I just wanted to ensure that we didn't just drop it and it went nowhere. I think it's important stuff. And the 24 things are already there, like they are there. People are already requiring them. So just saying, oh, we're upset that they're not clearly defined or whatever our upset is, doesn't mean they're still not there. They're there. So we gotta keep moving on this to help people with that. So that's all I was saying. So it sounds like we've got direction to staff and it's not a firm timeline, but we are moving forward.
Good for now, okay, thanks
very much, Chair.
bringing it around to that.
Did I rant there?
Not at all, I think I had enough airtime myself.
Can
So,
we take a break?
we have one more report before public time, so absolutely good idea. It's 10:14 on my
I gotta
computer.
pay full attention.
We will come back at 10:25, 9 minutes.
Right.
Thanks.
Chair, I think you've got to rope this director from area F.
Just so it's clear, we're gonna take a 9-minute break till 25 past the hour. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to call us back to order. If everybody could please take your seats. and actually start your voting. Okay, almost everybody's settled back into their seats. We're going to call back to order here at 10:26, I guess. So, next item on the agenda is item 7.3, bylaw 3009, responsible dog ownership. And currently framed around electoral areas A, B, C, and H. However, there is much more to this potentially, and I think Jordan's tried to pull this together. Now, so I wasn't sure, Jordan was here for a while. Sangita, were you going to speak to this one, or Jordan, or both?
No, I wrote the report, I can speak to it.
Okay, please, yeah, go ahead.
So through the chair, this responsible dog bylaw was originally proposed by Jordan, whose team did some research on dog control services across the province. And so the draft is being presented to you, and we're recommending at this point that it be given first reading and it be specific to areas A, B, C, and H, where there currently is no dog control service. However, we do have other regulatory bylaws that apply to E and F, to I and J and K currently. And so we're also recommending that possibly these areas consider repealing their regulatory bylaw at some point. The process is quite long and will require many steps. So the initial step that we wanted to take is just introduce this to you for A, B, C, and H who have been waiting. Area G and D currently don't have dog control service, so if this was desired in those areas, it could be applied throughout the regional district as the bylaw for responsible dog ownership. And so at this point, we're just seeking your feedback. Who wants to consider it? There's 3 things being identified in there that are currently part of our existing regulatory bylaws, which is patrols, dogs at large, and leash requirements. So if that was something that you needed for a question, I think Jordan has entered the room. He can speak to it from on the ground.
Hey, thanks, Sangita. So you nicely framed the sort of two things here, as you just said. I think today we should get a sense of the overall response. Are we going to go in this direction wall to wall? The other point, I think that as you say, this is currently framed for areas A, B, C, and H. We don't have Director Popoff here. He almost never misses a meeting. So, I mean, family first, he's not here today. And I don't understand what his main areas of focus are. I do know that my main areas of focus for well over a dozen years, I think the 4th Staff Sergeant now, are on the dangerous dog side. And I thought there was consensus with directors from area B and C that would be, which would be like 80% of what Jordan's drafted. That would be it. Maybe different title. That would be the bylaw. 80% of what we need. 100% of what we need is in the words that are on the page. Just remove some things. So that would create a split. So before even like trying to go further down that path, what is your understanding in Director Popoff's absence? How many of these elements of the bylaw are critical to what he feels his residents are asking for? And then maybe we take that big picture, which you and Jordan have framed well, and get an idea from the rest of the directors, is that where they think they'll end up? And then if it's not, then maybe we'll be looking at 2 bylaws, which I think is what Jordan was trying to avoid. So do you have a sense of what Director Popoff was trying to encompass in this exercise?
Yeah, through the chair, I received many emails from Director Popoff that come to him from residents in his area who have been either attacked or their dogs have been attacked by dogs at large or vicious dogs. Mostly we call it vicious because under Section 49, we have the authority to address dangerous dogs, but initially we need to consider the dog as vicious. And the bylaw proposes that the vicious dog, once it's identified, that it be also registered, so we are aware of it. And that allows us And Jordan can speak to, oh, sorry, aggressive, sorry, the right word is aggressive, not vicious. And Jordan can speak to how that legally sets us up if there should be an incident that created, you know, some injury to a human, how section 49 could then be applied. So maybe Jordan, you wanna clarify how this will help for
Shannon
prosecution?
Burgundy.
Sure, so I mean, through the chair, enforcement's always best viewed when it's conducted on a, you know, graduated, you know, kind of approach, so this allows for us, so when we started, we, you know, took the original 3 bylaws and tried to combine them into one, but, you know, I originally, when I last spoken with the board on this subject, I talked about, you know, the value of a bylaw that is, you know, you're a responsible dog owner, keep the dog on your property. When it's off your property, keep it under control. As Manager Sudan has suggested. Now, when we start adding things like the 3 existing bylaws we have, we mentioned leashes and dogs at large and dogs barking. The more we have in the bylaw, the more expensive it's going to be. The simpler it is, the least expensive I think it will be to administer. So. The bylaw provides, you know, we've whittled it right down. It provides direction, you know, as a responsible dog owner, you keep your dog confined to your property, period. That makes enforcement easy. If I have a picture of your dog off your property, then it's not on your property. But of course, we would take that, you know, an educational approach at the beginning. If you have a dog, we started off with a couple of different categories of problem dogs and simplified that into just aggressive dogs. And we have a range of tools available to us in there, you know, to protect public safety, to address the you know, primarily dog on dog kind of situations, and to address minor dog on human situations. And then the bylaw empowers us, of course, to take action under section 49 of the community charter to deal with a dangerous dog. And, you know, my position there would be that would generally be reserved for situations where there's been a serious attack on a human being. So to me, it gives us this is the least expensive bylaw for us to enforce. We removed barking dogs. There's a discussion to be had there. Sorry, I don't want to get ahead of.
Yep, no, go ahead because these are all the
just in a nutshell, you know, we have spent a lot of money dealing with barking dogs, and I could go around this room and I'll get a different opinion from every single person because I asked, how do you think we should? So I mean, right now, like we've removed it. We want to deal with it under the noise bylaw. Exclusively, which means now like bylaw officers deal with it and bring our skill set to the problem. But you know, we need to discuss barking threshold. I can run a jackhammer over here all day long. Do we really want to enforce dogs barking during the day? And it costs money, right? So that's a discussion that needs to be had. Dogs at large, do we want to be going around, like there are not packs of dogs running around the RDCK. We've now successfully been able to gather more data and you know, a large part of the enforcement that you know, we're taking, that our contractors are doing you know, is around barking, is around, you know, situations that I don't necessarily think we need to be involved in sometimes. So the more we add to it, the more expensive it will be. So, but we need to have discussion about leashes for sure. You know, is this a sufficient definition of control that most of the general public is going to understand? Oh, I have to have the dog under control at all times.
Okay, thank you. So, developing a bit of a speakers list. So Vandenberg, Watson, I'll put myself down lower. No one else just went in chat. Tierney. No, okay. So Vandenberg, Watson, Tierney. Please go ahead, Director Vandenberg.
Great, thank you through the chair. Okay, so my understanding this is the first time reading, and there's an invitation for us to input. Correct. Heard the office, and from my perspective, in the Crescent Valley, we move forward on this. Okay, so I'm all in favor of moving forward on this, providing my commentary and comment for the second and third reading, to which I'll ask more questions at that point in time, which is relevant or my prerogative, and not being disrespectful to our director who's not here today. Does not, I don't see we're splitting this, is moving anything forward or because he's not here to, it's first reading.
Yeah.
We all have a chance at it after this point, so that's the only comment I want to make. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Board Chair Watson.
Thank you. So through the chair to Jordan, I believe I've asked this before, but I have two questions that not to take away from what other areas need. My first question is, we were doing a review on capacity for bylaw. My understanding is that, I know this is not a part of this one, but if D was to be added, the last time we did do a feasibility study, it was extremely expensive given the geography. And so that bylaw capacity was part of that conversation, was what can we actually do? Because if we do add in other areas, and even current, like we do actually pay into it through the rule admin, but we're not receiving the service, so there's a discrepancy there. Where is the bylaw capacity assessment on what it would cost to fully provide these services? And then I have a supplemental to that.
Just quickly speak to that. So,
Sure.
through the chair.
Yep.
So the cost is determined based on service level. So that's why we're asking, do you want patrols? Do you want us to address dogs at large? Do you want us to address leash requirements if people are walking their dogs off leash? So that will determine the service level. And also how that service is provided. Currently in the areas that it exists, it's through contracted services. And so all those things apply, the patrols, except for area K and I and J, we removed it. Last time we negotiated the contract, ENF is still ongoing. But that lowered the service level. So that's really the threshold. For the way this bylaw is written, is that it addresses aggressive dogs. So when you have an aggressive dog complaint, it may happen on a Saturday, as an example. We will not hear about it till we're back in the office on Monday, receive that complaint. And then if it's done through if it's a contractor, they can respond immediately, versus if it's staff, they would have to address it on a work day. So there might be a lag on that response if there was an aggressive dog incident. But regardless, like if it turned into a dangerous dog situation, we won't be there immediately, even in those circumstances. Usually the RCMP is called when there's a dangerous dog incident, especially on a human. And then after that, we start our investigation, working with the RCMP and looking into the situation in more detail.
Thank you. My
Further?
supplemental,
Yes.
this is perfect segue to my supplemental. So I'm grateful to hear that, like, we know under the community charter, RCMP have the jurisdiction to act on dangerous dogs. We know that. We were able to determine that with the issue that did initiate the feasibility study for Johnson's Landing at one point on dog servicing. So I want to be sure that we're not, and for me in my area, it depends on the RCMP sitting in the office there, and every time they change, I have to go back and say, yes, under this provision, you can do that. And so oftentimes it's us letting them know, no, there is a provision where you can act on this. You do not need a dog bylaw to do that. However, so I just wanted to be clear, we're not taking on the job of the RCMP, even when they know either they lack capacity or they don't know because they're new in a rural area that they can do that. So that's one component. So they need to still be maintained, and we need to really enforce the fact that they have the jurisdiction to do that. I don't want in any way for our rural areas, which for a dog service in a rural area, especially as large as D, it is not feasible. I do not want the service because it is highly unfeasible to think that we're going to have Jordan drive out to, Hauser to deal with a dangerous dog, which there's two. We know them. People know how to deal with them. It's not ideal in any way. These are municipal-based servicing. So I want to make sure we do not in any way derail from the fact that RCMP can respond. The gap, which we understood from the Johnson's Landing situation, is that there is no funding for the RCMP to deal with impoundment, to deal with actual dealing with the dog. And that's where they wanted us to step in. So from my understanding, it's not response, it's dealing with the animal and the impoundment issues that funding should go to. So that would be my input on this. Again, it's not my area, but I don't want us to set a precedent for, RCMP and other rural areas are like, no, well, you've got it in C and B, so why would we respond at all? So I want us to be really clear about how we're indicating where we step in. and not replace the responsibility of the RCMP specific to dangerous dogs. This is not barking, this is not leashing. Frankly, in rural areas, like, look after your animals. I don't want to bill you all to deal with someone's bad dog. That's just personal. I hope that was clear.
I get it. Yeah,
I just
to the
wanted,
response to me, yes, go ahead.
yeah, and you covered the piece that needed to be covered for A, B, C, and A, B, and C. We found out from the RCMP there, they have no ability to hold a dog, which is fine if there was a dangerous dog. So imagine a dangerous dog incident and it's on a human. Of course, people are gonna call an ambulance, the RCMP, there's gonna be a response right away if that incident is, bad enough and if someone reports it. But then the RCMP has also advised us that if at the same time, because we don't have many members in the detachments nowadays, if they're dealing with something that is more of a criminal matter, that will take precedence. So it doesn't mean that it won't be responded to in some way, meaning that individual who's been injured can go to the hospital or ambulance services are there and such. But then after that fact, both the RCMP and us can address that incident in a more investigative and collaborative way with them if needed.
Supplemental to that?
Sure, the attorney, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And I do really, ideally, we have the same things happening. So I hope you're okay with my comments here. I would really premise that we should have something on a website that says, what is our responsibility in a dangerous dog situation? Because we currently have this at the Meadow Creek channel, where, I won't say names, but you know them, are dealing with dangerous dogs, and they had to actually literally get in their car to get out. And every person that they spoke to told them, don't bother with the RCMP, they won't respond. I don't want to perpetuate that. The RCMP are responsible for responding. If they don't have the capacity, yes, that happens anytime. I've had gunshots in Cooper Creek and they're like, sorry, we're somewhere else. I'm like, okay, I can't do anything about that. But that does not mean I want the public to think we are responding to dangerous dogs, and the actual impact of that, we're responding to the needs to impound that dog and the financial resources needed to do that. So I just want us to be really clear about that, because getting involved in response that an RCMP would respond to is very different, and that is not the authority I would feel comfortable with us taking on.
Yeah, and that was, when I heard of that situation, very unfortunate. It scared the heck out of me, and I'm so glad she managed to get it out there.
But it remains, and the RCMP responded to them saying, sorry, there's no dog bylaw, we don't respond. That is incorrect.
Well, in that
So
incident,
we're gonna go to the rest of the committee.
I'm sorry.
Because we recognize the issues
I had more.
very much. I mean, we had 2 RCs in Area A yesterday, back to back, not code 3. You know something's going on, and that was probably more than half the entire detachment capacity spent their afternoon or a good part of the day in Area A. So we know that's an issue. Director Tierney.
Thank you, Chair. And well said, Sangeeta. And Jordan, really good job. Thank you very much for preparing this. Fully supported. Area B is a work for us, and yeah, I'm anxious to see this move forward and receive that assessment, the legal review. Let's get that done, and again, we really need it. Thanks.
Okay, Sangeeta, or do you have a?
so, yeah.
Then I have Hannah Graf and.
Yeah, so through the chair, so what we're really seeking is who wants to participate in considering this regulatory bylaw, and also what provisions under that regulatory bylaw that are listed, leash, dogs at large, and patrols should be included. That will help us to come back to you with a more robust bylaw.
Yeah, brought it closer to what public demands are. So we're gonna go Hannah Graf, Newell, and Weatherhead.
Hi, everyone. So I personally, I don't think the patrols are useful or productive in any way. I just want to say that I think there's a maybe an education piece that's needed for dog owners, and that's that, you know, I'm a dog owner, I have a dog, she's very timid, she's not gonna hurt anyone, but as a dog owner, it's my responsibility to realize Some people are afraid of dogs, full stop. Doesn't matter the type of dog or anything else. And so, as a dog owner, it's my responsibility to leash my dog when I see other people coming towards me in order to ensure that those people feel safe. And I think that's an education piece we need to do with the public in fairness to people who are just afraid of dogs.
Thanks for that point. My mom would thank you for that point for her entire life. We will go to Director Newell, Weatherhead. Journey for the second time, me in between. Director Newell, go ahead.
Thanks. Two things. First, maybe I'll ask, what about area F and E that have that bylaw already? Would this be the evolution of our bylaw? First question through the chair.
So I'm wondering if that would require assent to change this? Is that part of the question? Because you had public interest to have a particular service level, and this is very different potentially, either through general manager or CEO.
Well, we have discussion at the last contract formation about patrols, right? We thought whether we were going to have them or not, and Director Frost and I said, well, let's keep them for now. So that the patrol part isn't part of the assent, that was fallen. Like that would be a decision I think we could make at this level. So that was
interesting. Okay, so
anyway, I was just curious of the evolution of this.
I can, through the chair.
yes.
Patrols in general, and Jordan can, who looks at the logs that we get from our dog control bylaw officer, he can explain more, but patrols in general means that they're driving around the area, and as Jordan mentioned before, there's not a lot of wild dogs running around. Really, do they serve a purpose? Because really, we are mostly complaint driven by law enforcement. And so that's why we're saying, you know, if that's something that you desire, then we can possibly think about that. But the intent, I believe, at the time when the patrols were being asked by Director Frost and yourself was because you, especially in her area, in Arab Proctor, just showing that dog control service emblem on the car would help to deter some of the poor behavior that some owners had. But we don't see that much in area F. So, you know, again, it's a decision that you'd have to make, and that would determine service levels.
Thank you. And I have one other question, and that would be, we're currently paying $30,000 between E and F. How would this be funded? Like, how do you figure out how much you're going to be, and do you have to go to assent voting, or just what is the logistic on getting money from the areas, and how much do you?
If I can speak to that. So we're jumping ahead.
Through the chair.
Through the chair.
I'm trying to make eye contact too. I learned that in community.
Okay.
Yes.
So through the chair, I mean, that's jumping further ahead. There are options of how this service can be provided if the responsible dog ownership regulatory bylaw was to be implemented, and it could be through a contracted service. Again, you know, the example I was talking to Director Watson about, where a woman we both know was potentially getting attacked by two dogs. If we had registered those dogs as aggressive dogs, the next time that incident occurred, we could actually go in, we could actually at that point go in and investigate. But the cost of, in regards to your question about how the service can be delivered, there's two options. You either do it through contractors, or we bring it in-house and do it through by law enforcement.
Thanks. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Director Weatherhead.
Thank you, through the chair. So I am interested in area K. Part of this, I just am not sure about the complexities of would be the shared service with the village of Newcastle, whether they would actually feel this is a fit for them. Although I do find the complexities of sharing this service might not even be the best fit for us anyways. I feel like it's gotta be two separate services. I feel a municipality has greatly different and greater needs than I have. We do not need patrols, most definitely in rural. One of the things I was sort of looking for in here, and I'm wondering if this is the place for it to exist, would be just the leashing in public gatherings or public spaces like beaches and parks, because that is where we've ended up with some pretty aggressive dog situations where you've got multiple dogs and none of them are on leashes, and all of a sudden all hell breaks loose. So would that be a fit inside of this type of a bylaw? Because a band of dogs together can become aggressive, whether they were deemed aggressive dogs in the first place. Although I really like the distinction between dangerous and aggressive. I like that this is another way to bring this in, because our RCMP will not respond to dangerous dogs, as we have noted in the case several times over. So, just your thoughts on that?
Yep. Jordan? Yeah, through the chair, if I may. So my team and I, when we first started looking at this, we used stats based on population. But of course, this included complaints like barking dogs and dogs at large. So, we worked that all the way through, but you come up with a number that's not necessarily representative of what we end up with today. As Manager Sudan said, what we're really looking for today is who's interested in participating in this bylaw that you see, which is like basically as simple as this bylaw can get. I understand the RCMP responsibility, but reality is different, is what I would also say to that situation. So, we have done some service case kind of numbers, we've looked at different things, but we really don't get a sense of cost until we come to things like the leash. Now, leashing in parks, that was in, as the Director Joe mentioned, he has, a requirement. But if you strip all that out, parks can have in their bylaw, because they're already spending about $12,000 a year on dog control in parks right now. So they can amend their park bylaw to indicate that, there are certain conditions that exist within parks for dogs. And frankly, that's kind of needed bit because some of the bylaws in parks around dogs, you get into water lines where people are trying to argue, I'm going to the park because I'm, standing in the river kind of deal. So the cost and our capacity to potentially even deliver this internally, the simpler it is, the more likelihood there is of that, right? The more complex we add the more expensive it gets. Patrols, useless in my opinion, unless we have data that supports it, and we now have a data gathering tool in place. So if all of a sudden it turns out there is a big issue in location X, well then of course we could be out there. But patrols need to be in a marked vehicle. There needs to be a projection of enforcement presence. Hey, we are here, we're uniformed. Our contractors are not able to deliver that, right? And leashes, do we want to, I don't think we need to get into that unless it's in a park. Control is specified and the education piece is huge.
Thank you. Yes, supplemental then, I hear you, that makes total sense to me. I just would note that all of my parks are operated by societies. I do not have any regional parks, but I do have provincial parks, and I do have, Parks and Rec BC types of parks, and so that's a really good point. And I feel that with something like this bylaw in place, that it actually gives residents an opportunity to go, oh, well, we have this bylaw, so maybe it kind of helps the self-policing as well by noting that aggressive dogs would be something was seen in the bylaw as to be something that need to be controlled. So hopefully that would have sort of that I think it would help that along, and rather than no bylaw, which is what I have in the southern region of Area K, which has been a real problem.
I'll go, not seeing any other first time speakers. So lots of good stuff here.
You have Graham and Cunningham in the speakers list.
Oh, we do now. Oh, I'm gonna go anyway. We'll go back because they get timed well. I started saying I think 80% of the words are exactly what we need, probably 90% plus the words exactly what we need, in my view, to solve what I see as the issues. The first thing I'm a little concerned about impressions, and I know how you've said we're not going to respond to barking dogs as that, but calling something a responsible dog bylaw, responsible dog ownership is highly subjective, and people will be phoning saying that person's not responsible and the dog's not well pissed at. I would prefer if the target is aggressive dogs, leading potentially to dangerous dogs and RCMP or community charter action. Maybe it should just be called aggressive dog bylaw. Now, within that, you can build other words, but the focus is what maybe it should be called. Because for Area A, patrols are next to impossible. On or off leash, I really like what Director Weatherhead just said about, there's certain gatherings and maybe that would be an issue. That maybe you would leave something about dogs on leash, but otherwise pretty impractical. And the biggest issue I've always had is in parks. The highest one, if you talk right now to Joe Kirko, is Crawford Creek Regional Park, where the ducks and the geese never leave anymore. And so anytime now they're establishing their nesting areas. So those are all good. I do believe RCMP will respond more frequently if we have a bylaw along this line in. One of the, and I actually believe I'm 4 staff sergeants in on this issue for Area A. And members do not want to draw their service weapon. 2 big reasons. They don't want to kill an animal, but that is the only option they have under most circumstances where it gets to the critical, code 3 ambulances on site. They kill an animal on site. One, they don't really want to do that. They would have preferred to have the option where we had a mechanism, and I wouldn't say that our RDCK won't or can't respond and we can. Maybe we can, but if we have a facility that's identified to house the animal until it's determined to not be just aggressive, but potentially dangerous, and there'd be a ruling on whether the animal is destroyed, relocated, or repatriated, we need that facility. That might be a contract facility, and I think that's possible. But the RCs don't want to destroy an animal on the spot based on a single snapshot of what's going on. 2, when they discharge their weapon, there's a whole amount of paperwork as well associated with that kind of thing, right? Where did they discharge it? Was it safe? Who else was in the area? Were the children in the area? Was the whole family there? I think that's the biggest barrier we see, that giving them the only option of kill an animal on the spot is probably what makes them reluctant to respond. But if they know we have backup, and maybe we would pay the overtime, do what needs to be done, even on a weekend, to do as quick a follow-up as we can, maybe then they would be more responsive, because that's kind of what the members have told me over time. I'm hoping this will go a direction where that 90% plus of the words are what we need to focus, though I think if it remained when it comes for second reading as an A, B, C, and H wording, because to informally solicit who should be added right now may be reversed. If it comes back for second reading as A, B, C, and H, with what we've discussed here incorporated, that would be a better time for everybody to have the week in advance of this next committee meeting to say, yes, those set of words now are exactly what I think my residents need or would support. So I hope it'll come back very close to what it is, maybe pulling out a little bit here and there, or refocusing to the aggressive issue and not so much responsible. Because I would hate for bylaw to start getting people thinking, oh, I can have that irresponsible dog owner chased for being irresponsible because I don't like the dog food they give them. Go ahead and then we will go Tierney for the second time.
Yes, through the chair, just quickly, the name at this time is, we don't know what that's gonna end up. We need legal opinion to call a bylaw aggressive dog, maybe not legally sound, but these are things we can look into with the lawyer.
Thank you. And that is, of course, proposed in your current recommendation. Director Tierney for the second time, and we do have a staff recommendation that somebody could move if we want to carry forward. Tierney, then Weatherhead.
Yes, Area B would like to be part of this responsible dog ownership bylaw. It's affordable and totally agree with what Al Jordan framed it. We don't need patrols. They're ineffective in this case, but totally in favor.
So we don't have anything to vote on quite yet. Director Weatherhead, you may want to move a recommendation or just for the second time.
We have a comment and then move of the recommendation.
Okay.
That's me. In the under control of dogs, we do have items, 1, 2, every owner shall ensure the dog is confined. So is this specifying the aggressive dog or just being a responsible dog owner?
Being responsible, through the chair, being a responsible dog owner, your dog is confined to your property. You know, there's many ways you can do that, from fencing to electric fencing. And when it's off your property, it needs to be under your control. Now, we had to change, under leash, but we live in a rural area where people go walking their dogs. And again, like, we're not gonna be there, there's no point in having a criteria that we're not gonna be able to be there to enforce. Dog bites, they're all after the fact that we get, it's over, it's done. And we have, just to address the kennel issue, we have had some verbal discussions with a local service provider that would be interested in accommodating dogs that were seized, under section 49. Otherwise, if we have an aggressive dog, that's the only other dog we want. We don't want to be in the impound business of impounding, but if we do impound the dog, we want it to be, revenue neutral for the taxpayers. Your dog was impounded, you're paying the full pop for it. And we need to have fines in place so that if your dog does go off your property and it is at large, that fine structure gets progressively larger, because we can go quite high under the Offense Act. So that's my feeling.
Supplemental, and I have a whole other bit of the speakers list.
Okay, so then, but then our bylaw officer, if we have just some dog going around and defecating on the neighbor's yards, you're not gonna be responding to that.
We don't respond to that.
Just, this is, we have a bylaw, please contain your dog and yada, yada, yada. Okay, alright.
So
I can move the motion.
could I run through the
Thank
other
you.
three
Go ahead.
first-time speakers who, I have so many words on this page now, the speakers list. Apologies, Directors Graham, Cunningham, Davidoff. Please go ahead, Director Graham.
Okay, sorry, so through the chair, one thing that happens in Area E is we've got a person who complains like every week about a dog or other dogs. And I'm just wondering if there's any opportunity in the bylaw to deal with people that do that, because what we inevitably end up doing is just ignoring this person. And I don't think that that's really a great response.
Sangeeta?
Yes, through the chair, I know the person that Director Graham is referring to, and we've been dealing with complaints from this individual, not ignoring them for years. And so there has been both bylaw, and this is what Jordan was speaking to earlier, is the cost of dealing with just complaints related to barking or a dog, defecating on a person's property. And all of those things that aren't related to an aggressive dog take a lot of time for the dog control officer and for the bylaw officer to address. And in that case, it's been for several years. And we have a couple of situations like that in Area E, and the other ones in the area. So.
Thank you. Further, Director.
So supplemental, I guess my question was, is there any way to deal with that in the bylaw, so we can say to these people, like, the bylaw addresses the fact that, if you're going to put multiple complaints in on a regular basis, like that we aren't able to respond to these, just to give us sort of something like, for me, I just found like you guys know. So that's just my question.
So through the chair, if the bylaw specifies that all we're dealing with is aggressive dogs, then that's the answer we give this the individual who may be complaining about barking or a dog defecating on their property or whatever that might be.
And sure.
And further, we have vexatious complainants, across the board and related to different bylaws. So I think there's a larger discussion taking place around what we can do in those circumstances. But we tend to deal with them on a one-on-one basis, and so.
Thank you. Move to Director Cunningham, then Davidoff.
There we go. Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the chance to speak. I've listened to the conversations, and I certainly agree with most of them. I believe we should limit it to aggressive dogs. Right now, of course, under the, I believe she said something about act, dogs running deer or cattle, I understand can be shot by the nearest property owner or anybody. I have heard about that happening in our area once about 20 years ago. And it was apparently with the approval because it was just done. I think we can do a lot in the way of education, maybe just by putting knowledge. Make sure all our parks have no dogs allowed, no dogs on the beach, dogs must be leashed. Those are the kinds of things. And things also that we should have places where dogs can run reasonably freely, because also dogs do need their exercise, and it's good if you can get them out to do that off leash and to run, because I can't run as fast as my dog, and I have no intention of trying. But both the dog and I do need the exercise. Okay, getting back to the topic, I would like to participate in a service where we do talk about aggressive dogs and handling those things. As far as noisy dogs go, we have that controlled under our noise bylaw. And if someone complains consistently, we can, say, okay, we've contacted the owner about that. They said, that kind of thing. So let's keep it simple and, quite frankly, inexpensive. Some years ago, a dog jumped up on a person who was in a wheelchair kind of thing, knocked the wheelchair over, and the person fell to the ground and was hurt. He was already not mobile. He couldn't walk except with two crutches. But after this, he couldn't walk at all. And there was a big outcry at that time to do something about dog control. The dog was actually just being friendly and jumping up, but just the same. So I said, okay, let's go check into it. And I came up with a sample wording and cost. And I said, well, yeah, we can have dog control. Here's what we can do. And I outlined it. And I says, and the cost is going to be about $40 per family per year on your taxes. And then I got, you mean we have to pay for it? Yes, you have to pay for it like you pay for all services. Well, then we don't want it. And that's the way it's been in Weimar ever since. It's a great place for kids and dogs. And if you go down to the store, you'll see a dozen of each all the time.
Sure. Through the chair, just in response to Director Cunningham, I just want to remind all the directors, we are complaint driven. So, you drive out to Weimar, there's 10 dogs sleeping on the road. Those dogs are going to stay sleeping on the road unless somebody calls to complain that there's been an issue about that dog. We don't want to be living in a police state. And the reason that you gave about, people wanting to exercise their dogs is why we left the leash piece out. We don't want to make people lawbreakers right off the bat, because it's not realistic that somebody way out in the middle of nowhere is not going to have is going to have their dog on a leash all the time.
Exactly. And thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Director Davidoff.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Sangeeta mentioned something at the beginning of our discussion on this about the kind of all the steps that it would take to include those of us that already have dog control bylaws. But I think we've had service creep happen as well in the RD, where even if you didn't have the bylaw in place, like, I don't think have we responded to like dangerous dog or vicious dog situations in other areas, even if they didn't have dog control bylaws in place. And is that what we could expect, like in our areas where we have dog control and we have somebody providing the service? If we have a vicious dog issue, wouldn't they address that and not require us to amend our current service by dog control bylaws? Through the chair.
Jordan? Go ahead, Jordan.
Through the chair, again, the essential idea behind this bylaw is a region, district-wide service, and so we have 3 existing different bylaws right now for dogs, and I think the proposal would be that I think we've looked into the mechanism behind it with the province, and I think there's a repeal process and then the enactment, but that's getting ahead a little bit. I think again we're just looking for that consistency. So, and to speak to whether or not we personally are conducting enforcement. So in area A and B and C, there's been over the last couple of years perhaps 1 or 2 incidents in each area. We may take the courtesy action of sending a letter, but that's it, because we have no statutory authority to act, and so we have not. Where we have the dog control contractors in place, it's their responsibility to enforce the, components of the dog control bylaw that are in place in that area pursuant to the conditions of their contract. And so if there's currently, I don't know what the specific wording is right now, I'd have to have the bylaw in front of me, but there are provisions for the registration currently, I believe in your existing bylaw that will allow for some of these measures we're trying to incorporate into the new region-wide bylaw in terms of giving us the tools to deal with the problem dog.
Supplemental, Chair, if I may.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the question I have for staff is that in the next report, can you basically include that area I, that the area, the portion of area I that has dog control in place right now, that we don't need to do anything further? Or do we need to do something further? Like, I'm confused about that. Is that we've got it in place? Do we need to amend the bylaw through an onerous process to include addressing, vicious or dangerous or aggressive dogs? So I guess that through the chair.
So there's no motion on the floor. Before Sangeeta responds, your point of order, Director.
Director Davidoff, I don't know if he intended it, but we have a specific conversation on a specific set of instruction. I'm hearing from Davidoff that he would like to workflow something further into this.
So your point of order is, though, without a conversation, you believe Director Davidoff's line of inquiry is inappropriate?
It's beyond the scope of what we're just trying to discuss here.
I think, wait, Director.
Okay.
Thank you. I think I've given sufficient latitude as chair to open the door to people exploring different options based on what staff directly requested that they would like members of this committee to consider through this process if they want to become part of this. So what I'm hearing from Director Davidoff, and most of it will become offline, I understand, is he needs to know what sort of the mechanism is, and I'm hoping we'll get a succinct answer from from General Manager Sudan that would have to be an offline conversation, repeal, replace, that kind of thing. So I don't believe that what he's asking is out of order, but you're quite correct in pointing out that we are getting well beyond what we're going to be able to solve today. I think we need to come back to a second reading with the right set of words, and then there might be a more firm request for people to have their electoral area added to that set of words. So I appreciate it, but I do want to allow the response to Director Davidoff's concern about next steps offline. Sangeeta?
So through the chair, to address Director Davidoff, I think the question you asked was, do I need to even think about this other bylaw that's being proposed here right now? And we would like everybody to think about it, like Director Weatherhead has indicated she's interested in it. It's because your current bylaw requires patrols, leash requirements, and dogs at large. What we're proposing is specifically just addressing aggressive dogs and how we mitigate for that aggressive dog incident if it, prior to it even happening, by putting this bylaw forward to the public so that they're aware that these are the regulation around how that dog is managed. Currently, under the contract, we've removed patrols that you have for area I and J, including Director Hanegraaff. And we've removed, patrols basically eliminate that whole need for dogs at large as well. And so that was done because the cost of patrols was going to increase the cost of the contract. And so that's why those were removed from the current contract. And I just want to address one other thing that was mentioned. Jordan said we sometimes do things discretionary. In my opinion, that was kind of us overstepping our authority there. We did not have dog control service in the area that we sent a letter. I think that was done more because there was an issue around a park or private property. And so in that incident, we were just doing that more as a information thing for the public.
Okay, thank you, Director. Should we move maybe to a recommendation? I think Director Vandenberg is further. Director Davidoff, or do you have what you need to wait for the next step?
I can address stuff online, but I understand that Rural Affairs, we could pretty much speak about anything we want. And so I just going to mention that.
Not quite
related to an agenda topic, yeah.
During conversation, I think your comments were fine, because you are providing staff with what they need to know as they're refining the wording in this. So thanks, Director, and they have made note, because they'll have to have a process if you want to transition, absolutely, along with Director Hanegraaff potentially. To Director Vandenberg, then, we do have a staff recommendation for Weatherhead. Is anybody wanting to make recommendation? Director Weatherhead, either or.
You don't make recommendations.
I haven't been allowed to speak yet.
Oh.
I was just acknowledging you, Director Vandenberg, if you wanted to make a recommendation.
Yes, I would. That which the staff has provided.
Staff recommendation, do I have a
today.
second?
I will second.
Okay, so hoping we've covered most of it. Further discussion on the recommendation and direction to staff so far. Further discussion? Director Weatherhead, go ahead.
Thank you, just for the direction. I really like the name because I feel like the name in itself will kind of just provide that self-policing that I'm looking for. So in that, and we may not all agree on that, but I do like that name. Thank you.
Thank you. A very responsible comment, Director.
Yes.
Sure, I'm concerned that I've gone beyond the patience of my colleagues who want to move on to other issues, but go ahead, Director.
Through the chair, so I'm just trying to understand, do we have consensus on leash? I hear discussion about we're 90% there of the word, and I'm not understanding.
For the benefit of our colleague here today, you are asking us to comment.
This is a
after the
comment.
First reading. I've already sent you my comment,
Yeah.
so the answer to that is yes, but allow us per this motion to advise you.
So your concern is noted. That has
Thank
exactly
you.
been the
I was
process today. Thanks, Director Vandenberg. You're not going to get a definitive answer on first reading on a draft. Further, seeing none, all in favor of the recommendation staff's put forward today. Seeing a couple hands on line, that is carried. So now, and that won't go to board. No, which returns to staff to do further work. Very good. We have no items under environmental services right now. We have a closed session. We have public time before the close. Then we will return to open meeting after our closed session. So right now at 11:18 on my computer, I will open the floor to questions from the public. I do have a couple people in the gallery. If somebody wanted to ask a question, if you ask from there, that funny microphone thing won't hear you. But if you come and sit, that works the best. And then if anybody online has a question, if you could formulate it, we'll go to you next. So, and the point is to ask a question within the responsibility of this committee. Not a question, say, about waste management, which is this afternoon. If you could state who you are and then question, please.
I hope I'm respecting that limit. May I, before I say, just say I've thoroughly enjoyed this morning.
Oh, okay. Could you, to capture where you're from and your name, please?
Yes. My name is Mariette Saint Germain, and I live on Crescent Road on the North Shore.
Thank you.
My question is in connection with bylaws 3002 and 3003, the spearhead application for zoning and OCP amendments. In the committee report dated December 11, 2024.
So can I just hold for a second?
Sure.
It sounds as though you're going to do something that I've been seeing online through email continuously over the past couple of weeks. And that would be providing further input following the official adjournment of the public hearing for that application. So our procedure does not allow for us as the directors who are part of the board, we're certainly not, we don't encompass the entire board. We are not, by procedure, to be debating, discussing, having conversation around input that is not captured up to the adjournment of the public hearing, which was your opportunity and all people's opportunity, regardless where you live, to comment on this. So I see it as inappropriate. If you want to provide this committee with input on the appropriateness or the type of proposal, I don't see that as appropriate. If you wanted to ask us a technical question, say what happens next or what happens now, but if you want to give a preamble of additional input, that's not appropriate. I've told everybody every public hearing I've adjourned, I said when I walk out in the parking lot, don't follow me and give me more information because that is not appropriate. The information has formally been received by staff, where some of them are sitting in the room now. But if you have a question about the process, what happens next, that's fine, but please don't give us an opinion or further input on the appropriateness of that application.
Okay, I was trying to draw that fine line. I reviewed it a few times and I hope I did. What I want to talk about is something that was delivered prior to the third public hearing.
But we've seen all of that, so we don't need it
Well,
again.
I guess my question is, what is happening to it? That was my question.
So my understanding is we will receive a comprehensive report, and some of them are hundreds of pages long. In fact, I think I might have been critical of Board Director Davidoff that the volume of comments on his OCP was just massive, but staff did a decent job of trying to collate it, sort of here's in favor, here's in opposition, that kind of thing. So we will see a staff report with, what the proposal is, what changes might have happened between the stages of public hearings, because I understand there's more than one, and what their recommendation is to date. And then attached to that, there will be, in this case, potentially hundreds of pages of comments for us to review. And then as a board, not as a rural committee, as a board, all 20 of us will receive that information package roughly a week prior to the board meeting. And then we will have the opportunity at that point to either support, not support, or refer for whatever reasons for further. So that's the process. And I don't know if CAO or staff, but maybe CAO, if I missed anything about what happens next.
Nope. Through the chair, I think that covers exactly how the process would lay out from here.
May I just, questions on process are definitely fine. It's just not new details that we can take.
That's what I thought I said. So do you have another process question? But as a committee, the process is now out of our hands. It is now a board process. But is there another process question?
I want to try my question. You may stop me. I understand. I'm listening carefully to the instructions you're giving me. And I think it ties into something that was discussed earlier on the process of assessments. So the staff report requested an assessment to be provided of Spearhead on hydrogeological impact assessment. The residents paid for a second study and submitted that second study prior to the third public hearing. The process question we have is what happens to our second study because it was not provided by the applicant. It was provided by the residents.
That would have been part of the public input process, and Zach is here. That's part of what I expect I'm going to see in the coming weeks or month.
Yeah, through the chair, the idea is that report will be provided as part of the formal submissions as an attachment to the staff report.
Yep, go ahead. Yes.
Okay, so.
Similar line?
Yeah, my name is Michel Saint-Germain. My address, I live with her.
Yes, yeah.
So I try to phrase it as a process. To me, what you're facing as board members is two conflicting reports from professionals. And my process question is, how are you going to choose when two professionals disagree? One says that the risk to my health of drinking water is negligible. The other one says the opposite. And I think as a member of this community, my question is, how are you going to sort it out to make sure that the decision that you will be making will respect the risk to my health?
So
do you have the qualification to do it? Are you going to refer to a third party? That sort of.
Good point, just mentioned qualification. Okay, so we are policy, governance, budget setting individuals. So I don't think anybody pretends to be an expert and be qualified to make a judgment call on input. So as I said earlier, you heard me say to the other applicant and the like, the LR one, we have choices as a governing body, board, not us, it's not this committee. We will recommend based on the balance of the information that staff provides and what staff has investigated or their knowledge base or whoever they brought in, they will bring us their best recommendations. They will also highlight in reports risks or concerns. And bottom line, they generally provide us with options. And through the process, the report and the meeting and the conversation, we will try to understand why they put options on the page. So as I said earlier in this meeting, I've said pretty well in every meeting, or as our board chair, Watson says at her meetings, we have the choice to recommend something, go ahead with or without conditions or subject tos, which are very common. It could be a subject to for the clarification of this or that because of the importance, or to not recommend, even to the point of no further action, or to simply refer the matter because the degree of complexity or uncertainty is sufficient that we just need to have more time and to look at the process from, maybe a little, back off a little bit. So those will be, in my mind, every time I sit down, every time I read the, board agenda is only 700 and some pages this time. Every item, that's on my mind. Do we know enough? Do we have firm recommendations? The risks understood? Do we need to know more? Where do we go from here? And there's sort of those three fundamental options. So again, not a decision of this committee, but I do appreciate very much that you came here to listen and sit. That will be the decision process that I expect under Chair Watson we will follow when this comes with the staff report with all of their options that they might want us to consider. Does that sound reasonable?
Well, it is reasonable. Again, I want to repeat my question. You're facing conflicting reports. I wish you good luck in sorting out those conflicting reports. And I would encourage you to be transparent to all people like you.
Yeah.
How did you choose the two conflicting reports?
Listening to the debate is your greatest form of transparency. And I have to say, I have a long enough career, some of us share gray beards. This is the most interesting job I've had because of this kind of process. So I don't think anyone sitting here or the board as a whole takes any of these decisions lightly. There are many considerations every time we look at something. And when we find we cannot make a decision, we have those options to move a recommendation with conditions and subject tos to make sure that we understand more, or to take the entire process and refer it to somewhere else. And I think we exercise those options frequently enough that we do end up capturing most of what we need to capture. I don't strive for perfection because of my, I can't be perfect, but we do have mechanisms to improve the process as we move along in decisions. So I do appreciate your questions. If it's okay, I will move to see if there's any other questions online. If you want to step back.
Thank you very much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming. We don't get a lot of people visiting rural committee. Our committees are where all the hard conversations occur, as you would have heard, where sometimes a little friction, differing opinion, but this is we can't have this type of conversation at board every month on every item. So this is where the work is done in our numerous committees, and we have dozens of these. Thanks. Online, I see a number of people, Valley Voice, I see names Doug and the like, or the public. Are there any questions for this committee, for the rural committee, from persons online? So just giving a pause to make sure someone has time to unmute. Any questions from persons online? Okay, I'm not seeing any, see nothing in the chat, no hands raised, so we will move on. So at this point, I would entertain a recommendation to close the meeting to the public. Moved and seconded, Vandenberg Kearney. All in favor? Motion to recess and reconvene in camera. Moved and seconded to reconvene. Kearney, I think that must be you. All in favor? Okay, so we have. I don't think we need another break. We just wait for people to be removed from the meeting. Meeting coordinator stays, public goes, evaluations.